Jonathan, Elizabeth, congratulations on your new documentary film, Without Arrows.
Thank you.
Thanks. Very excited.
You know what? I do have to admit, I love this documentary because it's ever since I took classes about indigenous Americans, back in college, their stories for years and centuries on their lives is always a fascination. But before I get started, it's being showcased on PBS Independent Lens. How do you guys feel about that?
I'm really excited. I can't believe that we got picked up by Independent Lens and that we get to share this movie with a national audience. It's really an honor.
Yeah. And just their slate this year is amazing. There's so many incredible films that are in this season. And we've met some of the filmmakers like on at festivals and stuff. And so it just feels like we're in very good, company and just honored to be, yeah, part of this cohort of
Mhm.
amazing films and filmmakers.
Well said, well said. So tell us what sparked you folks to make the documentary film Without Arrows in the first place.
So it goes all the way back to 2010. I was living in Philadelphia and I was doing an event, a film screening event, showing a film that sort of touched on Native American representation in media. And I was looking for some partners to kind of facilitate a dialogue after this film screening. The film was called Real Engine. And there's a Native dance troupe in Philadelphia called Native Nations Dance Theater. And I ended up reaching out to them and they came out to the event and just we had an amazing conversation. And that's when I met this guy named Delwin Fiddler Jr. And we just sort of, yeah, we had like really, polite, greeting. It was like, hey, thanks for supporting and I'll see you around sometime. And then months go by. And in early 2011, I get a phone call from a number that I don't recognize. And the guy on the other end just says, John, when are we going to make our movie? I was like, wait, who are you? Did we talk about making a movie? Can you like refresh my memory? And so it was Delwin Fiddler Jr. And he had this idea of wanting to bring a camera back home to the reservation where he grew up, Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe reservation in South Dakota, because he wanted to, kind of capture some family history stories from his mom and dad. And so we came up with this idea to go out to South Dakota. And I sort of showed him some of my work, which was more verite observational, and sort of pitched the idea of like, why don't I film with you in Philadelphia a little bit? Let's film the interviews, but let me just film the whole trip and we'll make a short, documentary about it. So uh, we got on a plane and it was the longest Dellin had ever been back home since he had originally left 11 years prior. And it was really beautiful just to meet everybody, but also see Delwyn really reconnect deeply to his mom and dad, his nieces and nephews, the land, and just something special was happening and unfolding that first year. And then we get back to Philly, think, all right, we got the footage, we're gonna make a film. And then like 2 months later, he gets a one-way ticket and is like, I've got to go back. I've got to be with my mom and dad. And just gave up his whole life in Philadelphia that he had, built over 11 years to go home. And then that's the moment sort of realized that something special, deep is happening. And so let's just keep tracking this story with Delwyn and see what happens. And Without Arrows, 13 years later is the culmination of that journey.
So it started off as a short documentary, but it became a documentary film. How were you guys prepared for something like this?
Can anyone really be prepared for a 13-year slog? I don't know. I was so happy to be working with Jonathan. His cinematography is so beautiful and it captures the beauty of South Dakota just exquisitely. And the way that he is able, because he's a one-man show with the camera, he's really able to grab really intimate um, portraits of everyone in this family. And it was really extraordinary to be able to work with his footage. It was a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
How was the production schedule like, since you have to follow this family for years? I mean, did you schedule like certain dates that you told them that you were going to be there, or certain moments that they had to inform you that what's going to happen? I mean, how did you handle that? Because, 10 plus years is a very long time to follow somebody.
Yeah, so it was I lived in Philadelphia through the whole time. And so sometimes it was just like, hey, here's the schedule works out. And someone was like, let's just gather like every day, life, just whatever you're doing, you're working, like let's just get the quiet everyday, moments. But then some of the filming was around kind of the family reunions. So like when the tent scene happened, that was like this event that, the family was preparing for months. And so I knew that I wanted to be there for the Elkhead family reunion and capture that. Um, and then there were other times where unexpected things happened where it was like, the funerals with, Delwin Sr. and Shirley, like we weren't prepared for that. And it was just like, okay, this is happening. I've got to be there with the family during these times. And those were just kind of rush, like get a plane ticket, jump on a flight and, just connect and film. So it was a mix of all of the above of like, yeah, things were happening. We knew it well in advance. Things were not happening. Just everyday life was happening. It was like, hey, let's just film. And then there were surprises where it was like, we've got to be here. We need to be together. And we just jumped in.
What kind of storylines that was definitely on your checklist that you wanted to portray on the reservation?
I think kick this to Elizabeth too, but the
Mhm.
one was like is where's home for Delwin Fiddler Jr. So like him being like the central person and like was established, had a life in Philadelphia, a successful career as a performer, and then he kind of like gives all of that up to reconnect with his family. And so where would he ultimately find home was one major storyline question that I was carrying the whole time, which I think we end the film, but I think Delwyn's still figuring that out. That's a pretty deep question. I think we're all figuring out actually.
Yeah, for me, I think that it was really important to showcase and highlight all of the positive assets that living on the reservation brings and the closeness of people and their families and how the strength of family and the light and the laughter that's often missed in the media, to show a lot of the joy that comes with being together in celebration when we get together and play hand games and feast, when we have our ceremonies, when we sing and when we dance. It was really important to show that and represent that part of reservation life.
Now, following a family for such a long time, I know Delwyn probably have a huge hand on convincing the rest of the family to go along with this. But how long was this adjustment for the family to even not even notice that you're there any longer?
Hmm. Well, so I think when I would film, it was, so over the years we got to know each other. But I think at first, like I was a constant presence. So I wasn't like staying at a hotel somewhere, staying somewhere else and coming back. It was really just a guest of the family and sort of like any family gathering. It's like, all right, you go here, you get the spare bedroom, you get the couch, you're on the floor. And so I like had all of those sleeping arrangements at various times. And so just being a constant presence at some point people just have to like move on with their lives and have the conversations that they're going to have. And so I sort of describe it as sort of disappearing into the foreground. Like I'm there, I'm connecting, we're having conversations, but at times like a moment is happening and I just like be quiet and I just like film, but I'm not like filming from the corner of the room with like telephoto lenses. I'm kind of like almost like right up on you and you sort of have to like look past me and the camera to engage with the other person you're talking to or the world. And I think people, it's a dance and everyone sort of like learns their steps. And yeah, I think that first year was like an adjustment period. And then, but every time afterwards was like a reunion and we're like reconnecting. And I think that, it was really sort of sweet for me. Like Delwyn's dad, Delwyn Sr., would always be at the airport to pick me up in Rapid City because it was just like, hey, it's something new. There was like, there's a novelty to like having John and the camera around. And yeah, I think it was in some ways a sort of like fun change of pace for everybody to, be filming.
It is, and one of the things that you portray in this film that's actually very important is the fact that you also go into the deeper private moments that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and the bad situations or death. How did you delicately handle that?
Uh,
Elizabeth, you want to jump in there? That's a good question.
yeah. We always take a huge responsibility as filmmakers to treat everyone who decides to participate in the film with honor and with respect, and treat everyone and their story as if we were talking about our own brother or our own father or our own mother. Um, and I think that part, I don't think we ever really struggled in the sense of handling it. And Derek Fiddler was so generous and beautiful with the sharing his song and his memory of his accounts of what happened with his brother. And Delwin was also so generous with allowing access to his grief, and but also remembering his father joyfully, and his mother too. It just was really beautiful to be able to be a part of such important moments in the life of a family.
And for those people who don't know, Delwyn is a grass dancer, and it's very important to showcase the fact that he tries to pass it on to the next generation. But tell us what is a grass dancer to those people who aren't familiar with the indigenous cultures.
Hmm. Yeah, so I can share what my understanding, and Elizabeth, if you want to correct me if I get anything wrong, but like what I've learned from Dalwin, or the way that Dalwin describes it, is that, back when, they were nomadic and they would follow the buffalo. And so if you hang out on South Dakota and you see the footage, there's lots of grass, tall grass. And so it's kind of what the grass dancers would do when they were going to make camp is they would dance to stomp down the grass so that they could set up camp. And that it just goes back for generations and generations. And yeah, that's sort of like the history of where it, came from. But then the regalia, what they wear, also is like symbolic. And so like, a grass dance outfit is different from a fancy dance outfit. And so part of it is like it's like representing like the grass, and that's like a piece. And so all those details are really significant. And I don't know if Elizabeth, if you have anything you could add to it.
No, you said it beautifully.
Well said, well said. And when did you guys know how to end this film?
Oof.
I think we're still figuring it out.
Yeah, I think, yeah, endings are tough, especially documentary, because there's not a definitive end. Life, continues. And, like even honestly, going back to your question about, death, it's like a way of like honoring these lives. And I think one of the messages, one of the things in the film is like, you never know how long you're going to have somebody, and you need to pay attention. And, Delwyn sacrificed a lot to go back home, and in terms of his career, in terms of his comfort. But he was home for 6 years. He had 6 years to be with his mom and dad on a daily basis. And what a gift that was, for him, because you don't know how long you're going to have, these people with you. And it's really about the generations
Mhm.
past of like the elders. You don't know how long they're going to be around. And so you want to spend that time and pay attention. Um, and so, yeah, anyway, that's a theme of the film. And so in terms of ending it, another surprise is we were anticipating Shirley. We knew she was in a nursing home, but, anticipating like, oh, we'll set up a screening in the nursing home. And, her passing away was definitely like a real
Mhm.
shock.
Mhm.
Um, and in some ways, in terms of the story, it really is like, okay, this
Hmm.
generation has moved on to the next world.
Hmm.
And now Delwyn's generation, it's their responsibility fully now to, did you listen? What did you get? What are you going to take and pass on to the next generation? Because that's how that knowledge and that love is communicated. Um,
Hmm.
so I think with Shirley passing on and then seeing Delwyn continuing to share his knowledge with his daughter and the younger generation just felt like that was an appropriate way to sort of, yeah, drift back as, the film ends and the real life of the Fiddlers and Delwyn and Cassie and all of them continues on.
Yeah, without arrows is definitely a very touching human story. Jonathan, Elizabeth, thank you very much for carrying this conversation. I love this film, and it is so fascinating. But you know, I am so glad that Delwyn is opening a new chapter to his life and continuing on. So thank you very much for this conversation.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.